The keys to a personal statement. Now, we're going to go over each of these individually. Sheet as well, so it'll have a lot of the information from the slides a little bit further. So the first one is to fill in the blanks. Opportunities to tell the college admissions counselor or the support reader or whoever's reading your application new information about you. We collect so much information from you through the application process. So this is an opportunity for you to tell us something new. One of the biggest mistakes that I see is people will rewrite their basically like a resume or their activities list into their essay. But that doesn't tell us anything new, right? If I wanted to know all the things that you've been involved with, I could read that on your activities list. Now, if there's one thing in particular that you're proud of, or one thing that's really shaped you, and you want to expand upon that one activity or resume item that you have, then that's a whole different conversation to have. But the biggest mistake I see is people really just rewriting long form resumes. Keep in mind that your essays are one of the last things in your application that you have 100% control over. So, what I mean by that is you can't go back in time and change your grades, right? You can't go back in time and do more activities. You can't really control what your letters of recs are going to say about you. So, this is one of the few things in your application that you have a lot of control over. So, tell us something new and give us a opportunity to learn more about you. So we're going to take a look at a weak example of an essay on this next slide. And I'm going to just preface this by saying we're going to look at some weak examples throughout this presentation, as well as some strong examples. These are just snippets of essays. Obviously, these are not the full essay. Um, I'll also say that the weak examples are ones that we completely made up. We're not throwing someone under the bus. The strong examples are snippets of real essays that students have submitted um, and have gotten into read through. So just things to keep in mind here. So here's our first example. In the 10th grade, I was the captain of the varsity cross country and basketball teams. I also started 3 theater performances that year and helped with the theater tech crew. It was a busy year. Last year, I started a recycling program at my school and did research with a neuroscience professor at Portland State University. This year, I'm devoting more time to my classes, but still playing saxophone in the jazz band. Let me ask you all, and feel free to take yourself off mute or put it in the chat box. Why is this a weak example? Yeah, exactly. And I've got a lot of comments here in the chat box as well. It basically exactly what you said. It's someone says it's just a big flex. Yeah, potentially. Although that's kind of what you want to do in your application, right? You kind of want to flex all the things that you've done, but do it in a humble way because there's a fine line between humble and bragging. But yeah, basically, you all got it right. It's not telling us anything new. It's not organized. It's basically just a list of activities they did. Great points. Um, okay, so the next point is be creative with the everyday. We're not looking for you to tell us the most dramatic story of your life because that's not who you're going to be on a day-to-day life on campus. We're trying to get to know who you are on the daily, right? um, Oftentimes we get these essays where it's like it was the big game and it was, we were down by 1 point or whatever, and it was up to me to score that last point, and I scored the last point and our team won and I was a hero. Or the other opposite, the opposite end of that, we didn't score that last point and we ended up losing, but we had fun and we learned as a team. These are fine. These are stories, but think a little bit more creative, right? First of all, those are probably really dramatic stories. You're not playing the winning game every single day of your life. We recognize you're all 16, 17, 18-year-olds. You haven't cured cancer yet. And if you have, you better put that on your application because but I'm going to take a stab and say that you probably haven't cured cancer yet. And that's okay. We're not asking you to do these insanely dramatic things. I was at a college fair in Denver one time, and someone came up to my table and started to profusely apologize before I could even say hello. And they were like, "I'm so sorry. I haven't started my nonprofit yet. I'm still working on it, but it's in the works. But I haven't started a nonprofit." And I was like, "Yo, that's okay. Like, we all can't be Ben. Um, it's fine if you haven't started a nonprofit. Uh, I'm just glad that you showed up and you're somewhat coherent, and that's enough for me today. We recognize that we're asking you to just tell us about you in the context of you. And we want you to showcase who you are now, not who you were 5 years or 10 years ago. If you did something really amazing back then, awesome, but then connect that to how that shaped you to who you are today. And what does that tell you about the person that you are today? Because the person you are today is going to be the closest perception of the person who we're going to have on our campus. So here's another example. The summer after my junior year, I went to Panama with my church youth group to volunteer. We worked every day building homes, playing with the children of the village, and developing an irrigation system. I thought I was going there to help people, but really, I was the one who was helped the most. Why is this one a weak example? Lacks detail, kind of cliche. All right, well, you guys pretty much nailed it, right? Here's the other problem with this essay. It says that you went on this with your church group. That means that you went to this event with a group of people. How is your experience any different than any of the other people in that group, right? I'm not knocking the service trip. I think that's awesome. And if that was a monumental experience for you, great. But make sure you talk about what is it that makes your experience different than every other person in that organization or that went on that trip? Now, granted, this is just one paragraph, so maybe this person would have expanded, but likelihood that they don't, and I'm going to tell you right now, this person didn't. Um, Although this is partially a made up example, anyways. Um, the other thing with this one is it reminds me of like bumper stickers. You know when like someone adopts a dog, and it says who saved who. This reminds me. This is the bumper sticker of essays. This is a little bit more. Um, of a broad essay, maybe a little bit more of a cliche. Tell me more about you and your experience. And again, I'm not trying to knock this experience. So if this is something that you want to talk about, awesome. Just make sure you're expanding upon it. The next point is to be focused. There's so many things that you can talk about. And sometimes I've read a few essays before where I finished reading that and I was just like, that was overwhelming. There's so much that happened in that essay. And I could have literally cut out like 3 of those paragraphs and it still would have made the same point. It's all about depth, not breadth. So making sure that you're narrowing down your scope of the story or the point that you're trying to get across or the value that you are trying to make sure the reader understands. It's a hard skill set, but there's a real strong skill set in being concise. Having the ability to share your thoughts, share your ideas, but in a concise manner is something that something you will really benefit from. When I'm thinking of essays, I often think of this keyhole analogy. Let's say I'm in your house and I'm standing in front of your bedroom, like at the door, and I scan your room. I'm going to see a lot there, right? There might be, your walls might be painted different colors, or maybe it's all the same color. Maybe it's just white or off-white, or maybe it's like hot pink. Maybe there's posters on the walls or things hanging from the ceiling. Maybe you've got plants or trophies or ribbons or books. Maybe you're clean. Maybe it's messy. Whatever it might look like, right? This tells me so much about you just looking at your room. Now, let's say you close that door and you look through the keyhole as if it was like some old timey keyhole, and you only see one thing in your room from that keyhole. And you've got to use whatever that object or whatever that thing is that you see through that keyhole to talk about the rest of your life, or to talk about the rest of your story, or share a story that really encapsulates a point that you're trying to make about yourself. And that's what we're asking you to do. So here's a really great example. I wear overalls to school, dark wash denim, baggy pant legs, and two straps over my shoulders, fastened tight by two copper buttons. I don't wear them for farming, painting, or railroad construction, but for the pure and sweet pleasure of wearing trousers that are held up by my shoulders. It's not an everyday thing, but when I wear them, I feel invincible. Why is this a strong example? Very unique. Awesome. What else? Specificity, it's clear. Yeah, I love that this person took this really like everyday object item. Yeah, great. It gives information about themselves and let you know what type of person they are. That's spot on. It takes this everyday object, these pair of pants, right? Overalls to be specific, but it paints this beautiful picture about who this person is. It tells you some of their values, right? It tells you that this is something that they feel invincible in when they wear. This also tells you on the inverse that when they're not wearing these trousers, maybe there's a part of their personality or their personal psyche that doesn't make them feel invincible, or doesn't maybe that they don't like this about themselves, and maybe they'll unpack that a little bit further. So this is a beautiful story that I'm sure if it was unpacked more would share a lot, even more insight into who this person is. And again, just all through a pair of pants. If you take literally nothing else away from this presentation, please, please, please let it be this slide. This is probably the most important slide out of this entire presentation. We call it the so what. This is basically when we're reading an essay, this is the heart of your essay. This is telling us why what you're writing, why what you're telling us is important. Um, this sounds kind of like abrasive, but basically it's like, why should we care what you're writing? This is the point. This moves on beyond that description and really tells us what is it that you want that reader to know. Um, I cannot tell you how many essays I've read in the past where I've gotten all the way to the end and I'm like, I have no idea what they're trying to tell us. Like, what was the point of that? What was the so what? I even still think about the so what when I write an email. Like, if I'm going to write a big email to like 1,000 students, I sometimes will reread that essay and ask myself, what is the so what of this email? Is this clear? Is this concise? Is this telling the person, is this telling the student that's going to read this essay or this email, I'm trying to get across? And I've had to revise my essay before because just asking myself that question really helps me catch that issue.
So what?
Um, so we're going to take a look at a great example here. And this essay, this example that we're looking at, in that worksheet is the full essay is in there. This is just a snippet of that essay. I do truly adore lobster fishing. My love for it extends past the obvious, past the fact that I make money, past the fact that I get to work outside in the beautiful summer weather. It extends far beyond free lobsters, even past the blossoming friendships that I have with my colorful coworkers. I owe it a vast debt of gratitude. Lobster fishing opened my eyes to hard work and determination, and in doing so, allowed me to flourish substantially in high school. What is the so what of this essay? Why do we like this essay? Absolutely. Yeah, great point. Someone just messaged me and said the writer describes how lobster fishing introduced them to hard work, which helped prepare them for future endeavors. Yeah, both this lobster fishing activity, and it basically breaks it down. And this person tells us why they enjoyed it, right? And what did it do for them? It taught them hard work, it taught them determination, and then this person even took it a step further and said this allowed these skill sets in turn allowed them to flourish substantially in high school. That's to the point. The other point that I want to make here is this essay compared to the last essay, the overalls one. This one is much more straightforward, right? The other essay with the overalls was much more, I would say, like poetically written. There was definitely that creative edge to it, whereas this essay is just a little bit more straightforward and to the point. And that's okay. Both of these are perfect examples that you don't have to write in a format or in a style or in a voice that you're not naturally comfortable with. And don't let the college essay be the place where you experiment that. I think sometimes people think that they have to write these like highly academically sounding essays or whatever, and or very creative or poetically written essays. Um, and you don't have to. If you're more of a straightforward writer, if you're more of a comedic writer, or if you are a poetic writer, write however is comfortable for you. And as long as you're still getting that point across, that's what we care about. Um, be careful with metaphors too. I've read some papers that were so metaphorical, like they were trying to paint this beautiful picture and use all these metaphors, but they lost me halfway through. I'd like to think I'm a pretty smart guy, and I can usually like interpret what they're trying to get at with that. Sometimes it reminds me of reading Shakespeare. Like you have to like think about it for a second to be like, what is it that they're trying to say? And I'm going to be really honest. We get about 8,000 just at Read here alone. We get about 8,000 applications a year. Last year, I read 1,100 applications by myself in 3.5 months. I don't have the time sometimes to go back and reread an essay if I was confused by it, because I've got another application to get onto. And I need to be able to read through that application once and be able to determine what they're trying to tell me and make some notes on that. And if I have to go back and reread it just to try to figure out what you're trying to say, you're doing yourself a disservice because sometimes I truly just do not have the time to do that or the capacity to do that. And so sometimes I've written in my notes, like missing the so what or incoherent essay, and had to move on because they just wrote so metaphorically that it's impossible to understand what they're trying to say. This last point here is a pretty obvious one, but it still becomes a big issue that we see from year to year. So we always want to bring it up as a friendly reminder. Proofread, proofread, proofread. Remember, spelling is important, grammar is important. The thesaurus is not your friend. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen a person write an essay, and you can very clearly tell that there's a word in there that does not match the voice or the style of the rest of the essay. And it seems like they probably put that word into thesaurus.com and then picked a new word that sounded more academic or whatever they're trying to go for and replaced it. I can always catch that because that's how I was in high school. So I will catch that. Make sure you read your essay out loud. That helps you catch a lot of mistakes. Sometimes when you're reading something in your head, your brain just naturally glosses over, especially when it's your own mistake that you made. Your brain is trained to gloss over it. But reading it out loud forces you to read every word individually. And so make sure you do that. Make sure you have another person read your essay as well. But be careful of how many people you've got doing that because too many cooks spoil the soup, right? And so when you've got too many people editing your essay, you start to lose your own voice. You start to adapt to their voice. So make sure it's like one or two people that you really trust to be able to provide you feedback and make sure that they could tell you, like, yes, this essay sounds like you, or this essay is clear and concise. And then make sure you're organized, right? Organize your thoughts and opinions using outlines, like use the basic essay tools that you've learned since you were in kindergarten are super important. I still use outlines when I'm coming up with like a communication plan or a long email or whatever I'm coming up with for work. I still use outlines to this day, and I've been out of school for a decade now. So these are still skill sets that you're being taught them for a reason, and they're going to really do you a lot of service. We're going to look at this last example here, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm not going to ask you to tell me what's wrong with this one. This one's pretty straightforward and obvious. Reed is my dream school as a small university. We're not a university. Reed is a college. And there is a difference between a university and a college. So make sure you use the right vernacular. Located in the Pacific Northwest, Northwest should be capitalized. Reed has everything I could ever want in a college. The psych programs, make sure you spell out the whole word. So, psychology programs, emphasis on neuroscience is what it should say, is perfect for me. I'm engrossed in my AP Psyche course. I also love hiking and skiing. I know it contribute a lot to the classroom. So maybe we have a thesaurus issue there. Maybe not. Maybe engrossed is a word that they use regularly. Um, I think they meant the AP psychology class, not the psyche course. There's a contraction error in there. I'm used to speaking up because my current high school uses the Harkness method. Read is a place where I can metamorphose into a true intellectual. That's definitely a thesaurus.com replacement because the only person that's doing any metamorphosing are butterflies. You, as a person, probably don't metamorphose into many things because there's typically no cuckoos available. So again, this is maybe a little bit more of a dramatic, weak example. If there's one or two errors here and there in your essay, we're not going to throw your whole essay out or your whole application out. I think there's a common misconception that admissions counselors are looking for reasons to deny you, and that's not true even remotely, right? We want you to be here just as much as you want yourself to be here. Um, Oftentimes what we do is after we review an application, we have one more person review your application, and then we have something called admission committee. During admission committee, it's the whole team, and we literally pull up every single student file one at a time and vote as a group. So I might pull up a student's application and I may say, here's Ben's application. Ben is a student at this school. These are his activities. This is what his essay told us. These are, what his grades look like, blah, blah, blah. I've got about 30 seconds to a minute to present you as a student. I leave it open for them to ask me questions about you. And then we literally vote. We actually vote yes or no. We have a paddle and everything. And so the fewer errors in your spelling and grammar, the easier I have to advocate for you. So help me help you in advocating.